Ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this month's Cardiff Business Club. It's great to see a number of you with us, individual and corporate members alike, and also I just wanted to thank you for your continued support over this somewhat different season. I'd also like to extend a big welcome to anyone who might be new to the club and taking advantage of this ongoing online meeting format. And we know that a number of new people have taken advantage of that, so that's great to see too. We have continued to deliver our speaker program, albeit in this online format, recognizing that we really do miss meeting everyone in person. And I'm sure this evening would have been a great example of the club drawing together a wide section of Cardiff and wider business life and cultural life this evening. This is actually the final event of the current and what has been a very different season, and we do hope that we may be able to start more normal gatherings in time for the new season, but we'll have to wait and see. As I've said previously, we've received considerable support over the last year, and in particular from our season sponsors, Cardiff Metropolitan University and Odgers, and their support is greatly appreciated, particularly through these challenging times. So the format this evening will be similar to our previous online events. I'm about to introduce our speaker, and after his address, we'll undertake a question and answer session. I know that Gareth is keen to receive as many questions as possible. And as per the joining instructions, please would you send your questions as concisely as possible directly to me by clicking into the chat box at the bottom of your screens, and then I will ask as many as I can in the time we have available. And also, if you could, please remain in mute mode. So on to introducing our speaker. Gareth Davies is a graduate of Harper Adams University and commenced his career in agriculture at a large-scale beef and sheep farm before joining Camira Fertilizers, where he worked for 13 years. He also established his own enterprise in fertilizer and seed sales, but then joined Wynnstay in 1999 as sales manager for South Wales, became head of agriculture in 2008, and then chief executive in 2018. Gareth is also currently a director of Hibo Cymru, Meat Promotion Wales. In addition, he's a member of the Welsh Government Trade and Supply Chain Working Group and the Welsh Government Rural Communities Body, and treasurer of British Grassland Society. Now, during the season, and indeed over the pandemic, we have endeavoured to hear from speakers representing a wide range of sectors, and felt it was really appropriate to have an insight into the challenges and opportunities that the agricultural sector in Wales has experienced, not only just because of Brexit, but also, of course, the impact of the pandemic. And I guess it's also quite timely having Gareth as our guest speaker tonight, with the Prime Minister announcing a new agricultural trade deal with Australia on Tuesday, and the opportunities and threats that that might bring. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to Gareth Davies.
Good evening to you all. Thank you, Scott, for those very kind words, and I'm very pleased to be addressing the Cardiff Business Club tonight. Thank you all for coming. Maybe not all of you would have been here last night. Excellent night for Wales, coinciding with the football, of course, so well done, Wales. So yeah, I'm Gareth Wyn Davies. I'm Chief Executive of Wynnstay. I do apologise to any of you who thought that you might have been having Gareth Davies, the ex-chair of the Welsh Rugby Union, or indeed Gareth Davies, the Welsh scrum half and selected British Lion, but it's Gareth Davies, Chief Executive of Wynnstay. So over the next 10 or 15, well, certainly 15 minutes or so, I want to give you a bit of background to myself, to Wynnstay Group PLC, and as Scott indicated, really, the impact that a number of events and activities within the economy have taken place: Brexit, the UK agricultural bill, COVID, and the water regulations, really, and what impact that has on the agricultural community of Wales especially, and also Wynnstay Group PLC. So first and foremostly, starting with who am I? So I think Scott has covered quite a bit of it, really, but and I'll give you an indication, really, to how I ended up doing what I'm doing. So, yeah, born and brought up on an upland beef and sheep farm in Bilthwell, near Bilthwells in Powys, and being the youngest of 10 children. So that's significant, what I'm going to come and say in a minute. 5 brothers and 4 sisters. As far as education is concerned, I had the best secondary education that Bilthwells could offer, be it the only one, being Bilthwells High School, and thereafter studied for H&D in Agricultural Marketing and Business Administration at Harper Adams Agricultural College. At that time, my belief was that H&D stood for Higher National Diploma. However, I've met many people since who are more educated than myself who point out to me what H&D really meant was had no degree. But there's a H&D that I did and agricultural marketing, which I followed. I was very keen really on practical agriculture, but as I indicated earlier, being the youngest of 6 brothers, it's only so many pounds, shillings and pence in the coffers to expand the farming enterprise with all my other 5 brothers farming today. I was very much encouraged by my brothers that my future really lay off the farm. And so there's the agricultural supply trade that attracted me. And upon leaving Harper, I had the opportunity to become a trainee fertilizer salesman moving to Pembrokeshire, a lovely part of the world, working for UKF Fertilizers. Delighted really at the time, £6,000 per year, a company car, and after my student days, renting a house on my own. So you thought, I'd really made it at that stage. And over the next 10 years, I'd gained various promotions. And effectively, 22 years ago, I joined Wynnstay as a sales manager in South Wales, covering Carmarthen really, and the surrounding area. And Scott indicated, then became head of agriculture before taking up the role of chief executive 3 years ago. And I would say to you really that my career has been based on commercial agriculture. You may ask yourself, well, with the background that he's got, how has he ended being CEO of a PLC? Fair question, really, because at the end of the day, my education was to H&D only, no MBA, no previous PLC board experience, no experience of the investment world. However, I am commercial. I do know the sector inside out. I know the company inside out, and those who chose me felt it could deliver. That 3 years, we've been through 3 years now, coming up July. It has been a steep learning curve with many challenges along the way, which I'll come to, but we have succeeded with a good team around us and certainly the support of all stakeholders. So I apologise that I will be using notes. Wynnstay Group PLC. I asked Scott the question when we joined the meeting just before you all did. How many people have actually heard of Wynnstay Group PLC? And maybe some of you have, but I bet many of you would not have, because we're in the agricultural sector, and perhaps that's new to many of you. So who are we? Wynnstay, founded in 1918, a farmers cooperative, based at Llansamfraid and Mechyn. So where is that? It's 8 miles south of Oswestry, and anybody here being a football fan may well remember TNS. So this village where we work in was the home of TNS Football Club. And if you remember, unbelievable really, but in the early days of Wales being represented in Europe, this village here, the football club from this village, played Liverpool in the qualifying round of the European Cup. So that effectively put Llansamfraid on the map. So our business is about helping farmers, both livestock and arable farmers, produce food. That's what we do. We supply farmers with advice and goods to produce food. We effectively supply most farm inputs with the exception of agricultural machinery. We manufacture as well as trade. We manufacture feed, fertilizer and seed. The farmers cooperative that we were, we wanted to expand, and the only way of expanding really was to raise money, either from the bank or from our farmer members. Our farmer members would rather invest into their own farms, and that's quite understandable. So the decision was made in 1992 to become a PLC. Revenue at the time was just over 20 million. And in 2004, we joined the AIMS market. So that's where we are today. We're PLC, we're on the AIMS market, mid-cap companies. Our market cap is just about today 94 million, and our balance sheet is about 100 million. So we're pretty well near to NAV really. Year ended October 2020, our last financial year, just to give you an idea of the size of the business, was 430 million with a PBT of 8.4 million. So you'll recognise from that, the margins are fairly slim in the industry we work in. We're seen to be doing okay. and our aim for a PBT percentage of revenue is somewhere around about 2%. But we are going well. Since 2004, we've continually made a reasonable profit, progressive dividend policy from the company. And our shareholder mix really is about 60% institutional, and the balance being those original farmer members, and about 15% of the shareholding is owned by staff. 80% of our business is business to business. So in other words, we deal with farmers on account. As a business, we operate through 4 strategic units, being feed, arable, agricultural depots, and some subsidiary businesses. But the key to our success, in my strong view, is that we're balanced. We deal with both livestock and arable farmers. So when one sector is doing particularly well and the other isn't, we're still doing okay. And we'll often find that arable farmers are doing well when livestock farmers aren't, and vice versa. So that's what the key to our success, really. And I will say that before I go on to the other subjects. We're a very proud company, proud of what we do, proud of our success, and very much proud of our heritage. So if I just cover Brexit to start with, maybe. As we all know, the vote back in June 2016 was to bring an end to membership of the EU, the advantages and disadvantages of being a member. From an agricultural point of view, quite important really, the EU was certainly the biggest trading partner for food products. 60% of all food we exported went to the EU membership, and 72% of food imports came from the EU. And very, very important to Wales, 33% of all lamb produced within Wales went to the EU. Just aside from that, really, you may not be aware, but we only eat 5% of all lamb produced actually in Wales. We only eat 5% in Wales. The balance is either a third exported to the EU, predominantly the EU, and the rest eaten in England. And 3.1 billion of agricultural support came from Common Agricultural Policy. So, the background to that is EU membership was quite important. But as a result, the farming community most definitely split on the vote. Why was that? Beef and sheep farmers rely on European support and the EU market. Poultry, pig and dairy farmers less reliant. So some people were looking for less bureaucracy, control of their own destiny maybe, and access to new markets. And as Scott said earlier on, that's very topical really, as I'll come to in a second, the Australian trade deal that been done this week. So what impact did it have on our business? Not good at all really, because we had 4 years of uncertainty. We had no idea if there would be a hard Brexit or a deal. And when I sat in front of investors and they say to me, what's the impact of the European decision upon your business? My answer was, well, what is it? And that certainly stifled investment into our business. Whilst at the same time, it also stifled investment into farms. Farmers did not know what the outcome of Brexit would be, whether there'd be tariffs on quotas or the products that they produced for export, or whether it'd be a unilateralization deal, which effectively meant tariffs on export and no tariffs on import. So a difficult period, really. We came through it, we still made reasonable profits, but we certainly stifled investment both in our company and the people that we deal with. But luckily, a deal was struck, and particularly important to the lamb market that I referred to. But of course, the trade deals. So the trade deals that we've done so far, Canada, Japan, I think will be good for agricultural products. And of course, this week, Australia. An interesting one really for agriculture, this. Liz Truss, Secretary of State for International Trade, says the deal with Australia, which has been agreed in principle this week, will not be negative to UK farmers. I'd like to see the detail because I can't quite see that at this moment. Why? She says the increased imports of food from Australia will replace those coming from the European Union. Maybe beef from Ireland, possibly. We import quite a lot of beef into the country, but very little sheep meat is imported into the EU. And whilst we all have to learn to be in a free market, that will give efficiency, UK agriculture does ask for a level playing field. Food standards in Australia are different to here. Growth promoters are used, certain pesticides are used, feed additives are used. Some of these are banned in the UK, and they are banned for a reason. So I'd raise that question really, equal playing field, please. And also cattle will be finished in very large scale feedlots, whilst in this country, farming is being encouraged to become more extensive as care for the environment. We understand there will be a trade-off, isn't it? Fairness and transparency is required, please. So the Australian trade deal very, very clearly suggests that the amount of food, being beef and sheep, without tariffs and quotas will increase significantly over the next 10 to 15 years, which can only be a worry for those who produce food here. So too early to see the rest of the challenges of Brexit at this stage, as we're only just into it, but certainly we've seen an impact on the supply of product in and out of the country with a bureaucracy of red tape. So I think the Australian trade deal is a worry for the UK, details still to come. As far as COVID is concerned, yeah, this is an interesting one, COVID. The initial lockdown in March 2020 was a severe blow for ourselves as a company and also for the agricultural industry. Our working practice was most certainly badly disrupted at the time. On farm, what happened on farm? Immediately overnight, because of the closure of the food sector and for certain shops, etc., lamb and beef prices fell by 20%. Milk was being poured away, the closure of the hospitality sector, abattoirs reduced throughput, and export markets fell. So not a good start, really. Incomes fell and product has been difficult to sell. However, as time went on, for agriculture, COVID has been a silver lining. For Wynnstay, we were deemed as an essential supplier, absolutely key. So although our depots closed to the public, we operated click and collect. Some of our competitors closed, our business actually picked up. All our manufacturing and distribution operations remained open. And that clearly shown the resilience of the business. For our customers, the farmers, the closure of the hospitality sector, whilst an initial blow, it meant that many of you, I guess, were home cooking and inevitably sourcing product locally from butchers and retailers. The majority of the meat in the hospitality sector, when we go out and eat, actually is imported. The majority of the meat sold through butchers and retailers is home produced. Panic buying led to increased demand and prices started to rise. So as a result of COVID, when we look back on the last 12 months or so, we have seen an increase of 10% or so of the spend on home produced lamb and beef. Egg demand rose by 40% at one time, up 5% year on year, and demand for cheese rose significantly. So while exports were impacted, so too were imports. So coinciding with COVID, has anybody heard of African swine flu? African swine flu hit the Chinese pig herd. Maybe a useless fact for you actually is that there's more pigs in China than the rest of the world put together. So protein in China was very much driven by small-scale pig production. New Zealand and Australia have been sending red meat to China, better markets in the UK. So when you couple together COVID plus what's happened in China, in the last 12 months, our farmers have seen record lamb prices. Lamb has never sold so well. Beef has been an 8-year high. Milk prices are increasing. Strong demand for eggs. And although the price of inputs have gone up, particularly impacted by COVID, with some factories closing, etc., agriculture is in a good position. COVID has been good for agriculture in the longer term. And at Wynnstay, we're very, very fortunate that the business has not been impacted other than extra running costs. And our business has shown resilience. We're very, very grateful to our members of staff who are prepared to come into work. Well, I know many others in other businesses found a reason not to. So COVID for agriculture has been good for agriculture, good for Wynnstay. But I say that obviously recognizing that many, many people have suffered personally and also their businesses as well. But from an agricultural point of view, there's been some good outcomes. So I'll touch on the UK agricultural bill. And this is a way that farmers have been supported by the Common Agricultural Policy. In other words, top up to what they've been having for their produce. It's a new pathway to the UK devolved governments will support farming going forward. I mentioned earlier on that the UK agriculture receives 3.1 billion from the Common Agricultural Policy. I think an important point to emphasise really that in 2019, this agricultural support of 3.1 billion actually accounted for 61% of the total income on farm in England, more lowland, and 80% of the total income on farms in Scotland and Wales. So very significant for the sustainability of agriculture. Under the Common Agricultural Policy, farmers were paid a flat income per acre, irrespective of good they're at farming. So I'll give you an example. Scott could be a farmer with 250 acres doing a damn good job, gets the same amount of agricultural support of me next door, who hardly does anything to the farm, just ranches it, but the same support would have been there. And that system really wasn't going to continue. Agriculture has been supported from the Second World War when it was necessary to feed the nation by encouraging production. So going forward, the changes will be farmers will be rewarded for production efficiencies and environmental outcome, public money for public goods. Farmers will have to invest money in their businesses before they get a return from the government support. Is that such a bad thing? I don't think so, really, isn't it? And they'll also be given a transitional period of 7 years to be able to get their house in order. And the current government has committed the same amount of agricultural support for the duration of this parliament, which effectively could be up till 2024. So what does it actually mean for the future shape of UK farming? There will be less farmers because there'll be economies of scale, but that will happen anyway, and that happens in all businesses. But this system will encourage efficiencies, new technologies, automation, robotic milking of cows, robotic tractors. People will invest in efficiencies of production because they'll have grants to do so. And of course, environmental management, planting of trees, restoration of peat bogs, green energy, planting wildflower mixes rather than just productive mixtures. And the outcome of it all will be that the better land will be farmed more efficiently, and the marginal land will seek income from environmental schemes. And I strongly believe that the change that the government is doing, how they'll support farmers, will most certainly encourage the younger generation to come to the fore and embrace technology. I don't know if you're aware, but the average age of the farmer in the UK today is the ripe young age of 58. So we need younger people to come into the industry. And I believe that this system of agricultural support will do so. It's also good news for Wynnstay because those who concentrate on farming will invest in their businesses and invest in people like ourselves. And very briefly, I'll touch on the water regulations, NVZs. This is quite topical, actually. What it really means is that agriculture is seen as a pollutant, pollution of water, particularly large-scale animal production is. So the Welsh Government have just introduced the water regulations, nitrogen vulnerable zone for Wales. The whole of Wales will now become an NVZ. And what will this really mean? There's restrictions on farmers on what they can produce, when they can spread farmyard manure and waste, and effectively what it will mean that if you're an intensive farmer today, you will have to acquire more land if you want to keep the same number of animals. If you don't, you will have to reduce your income by reducing the number of animals. It's pretty tough for many people, really. It is feared that the demand for land will increase, so therefore it'll put an artificial price into the price of land to buy or rent. And it is very contentious. The NFU, the National Farmers Union, the Farmers Union of Wales have certainly been opposing some of the guidelines set by the government. But it is coming in, and it will be a challenge for the sustainability of many dairy farms in particular. So just conscious of time, Scott mentioned some of the organisations I'm involved with. I am a non-executive of Hubby Key Cymru, Meat Promotion Wales. It is a body responsible for the development, promotion and marketing of red meat, a company limited by guarantee and wholly owned by Welsh Government. And for me, it's a great fit for myself because I have a passion and a desire for success of red meat within Wales. personally and also from the company I work for, and it's a good fit for Wynnstay. I'm also a member of the Midwell's Economic Strategy Group, very much in its infancy, and that's to identify the potential and pathway to increase investment in Powys and Ceredigion. I'm a past a member of the YFC Finance and Management Group, and I would stress here really that I'm a really strong supporter of this organisation for a number of reasons. Within the rural communities that we work, it is a good training ground for the younger members to be leaders of the agriculture for tomorrow, and also employees of Wynnstay. Absolutely key, and some really good employees of ours have come through the Young Farmers Movement. Great believer in giving youth an opportunity. I have a duty to ensure that we offer a career path to our employees, and especially the younger members. And I will say this because I know they're a sponsor of Cardiff Business Club. We are engaged with Cardiff Metropolitan University with a 2020 Business Management and Leader course. And certainly the first tranche of people through that have come on enormously because of, and we'll be supporting that going forward. So just to conclude then really, for agriculture, I see a number of challenges for UK agriculture, but I also see many opportunities. These challenges include the trade deals. Well, we must have an even playing field. Challenge of need to change. I mentioned the average age is 58. Not all people are capable of doing so or want to. Compliance, the cost of compliance. How competitive will we be against our competitors from overseas? Labour shortage, most certainly, like many of your businesses maybe. Seasonal labour from Eastern Europe. Succession in our industry and the affordability to do so. Land prices will go up, I'm pretty well sure of that. How can people afford to do the return? And farm safety. The farming industry is a dangerous industry to work in. Every week I read the Farmers Weekly, and unfortunately I see another tragedy. But putting that one aside, there's great opportunities here. Whilst we talked about Australia, but other trade deals will bring new trade. New markets have opened up in the Middle East for lamb, for example. COVID, I believe, has also strengthened the need for food security and to buy local. And the government have committed to agriculture, so they are committed to change agriculture and make it effective. And as a business, we're particularly well placed to strengthen our position within the supply chain, not only by increasing market share, but also taking costs out of the supply chain. Our strategy is very clear. We deal with agriculture, we deal with farmers, and our growth will be in the UK by doing more of what we do well. It's quite simple, really. We're not looking to diversify, but just continue to do more of what we already do well. And I am very confident that I can achieve my ambitions because I've got a great team of colleagues and a great support from our stakeholders. We as Wynnstay are most certainly here for the long term. So that comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Gareth, thanks very much for that. And certainly, I've really enjoyed learning more about the agricultural sector, one that's really important for Wales, and not one I knew that much about. So I'm sure we'll get lots of questions. So if everyone could start sending them in, I have already got a few here. The first one I had, and a number of them are on the topics that you've actually covered, Gareth. First one's from Paul Thorburn, who says many of his friends and colleagues often question why we import meat products from countries like New Zealand, whilst also seeming to export the same meat to them, to those similar countries. And obviously we've got the recent Australian trade deal, which kind of emphasises that. But given that all countries are trying to cut down their carbon footprint, it doesn't kind of make some sense on the surface. So it was really just to see how you can, how that's justified, and kind of, how would it not be possible to satisfy our own domestic demands first before we then considering exporting meat outside of the UK?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it's something I often get asked by our investors. So if we take first and foremostly self-sufficiency, UK is effectively 60% self-sufficient in food. So therefore, unless we produce more, we'll have to import. But if you take lamb, it's a good example, lamb really. We are just about 100% self-sufficient in the UK for lamb. However, you hear me saying earlier on that we export a third. And that's all down to balance of cuts. So in the UK, we're leg lovers. We're leg lovers. And if you think of your own, if you buy lamb, it's either a shank or a leg or a chop. But the balance of that carcass is absolutely key for profitability. So we import legs from New Zealand. And why New Zealand? They're a sheep producing country, but also it goes back to a long-term agreement. And I think it goes back as far as the Second World War, actually. It was something to do with New Zealand, maybe helping the Allies out, etc., and working on the side of the Allies. But there is a tariff-free quota from New Zealand, which is pretty well set in stone, into Europe of 200,000 tons of sheep meat. I mentioned earlier on that hasn't been taken up recently because there's better markets in China. So to answer your question is, why do we import sheep meat, for example, when we've got more than enough here being exported? It's solely down to balance of cuts. So unless we can persuade the housewife and the consumer to maybe mince lamb and to be able to market the less favourable cuts, I guess that'll continue because the premium for those cuts are elsewhere at this moment in time.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. I've got a couple of questions on pricing, so I'll just sort of amalgamate those. So Anne Bynum's really asking is what do you think will happen to meat prices in September, which is when most Welsh lamb is sold for export, and when less meat is bought here, and obviously we've got restaurants opening up, etc. And Derek Jones has a fairly similar question: do you think that the very welcome increase in these prices, I guess, for farmers, etc., and particularly in Welsh lamb since Brexit, is sustainable?
I think for the short term, I would say it is. So let's just cover this maybe this calendar year. I think it is sustainable this calendar year. I think the outlook is particularly strong. Now the reason for that is relating back to China again. It's all supply and demand. China is obviously getting more affluent, but there is a large gap in China in relation to home-produced protein, factory pigs. So that pig herd will build up in due course. Longer term, I'd be surprised if sheep meat remains at the levels that it is. We've seen significant increases over the last 12 months by anything up to a third. And I would say market levels today are probably anywhere around about a third greater than anticipated. So short term, I think it is sustainable based on supply and demand, particularly from China. As the restaurants open up, etc., and we start to import a bit more, they will go to whatever the best deal is. So the Australian free trade arrangement, I'm pretty well sure, will have an impact longer term on the price of red meat in this country. So longer term, I don't see it sustainable at the levels it is now.
Okay, well, Resealey's sort of asked a sort of an adjacent question is, do we really think that customers will buy meat that's labelled from Australia with all the food miles and environmental impact that has versus homegrown products? And does farming need to be a bit more positive about the great products and the locally sustained or sourced products that we have here?
I think I'll answer that with a bit of both, really. Those people who take an interest in traceability, sustainability, we're producing food here today. For example, Wynnstay is a company. We do not use any soya in our diet. It's protein source soya, all sourced from the Americas. That has been grown in rainforest. So some of our retailers, Waitrose is a good example. We supply into the Waitrose integrated egg chain, for example, would not deal with us if we were sourcing soya from a non-sustainable source. So there's an element of the customer base that want it and will pay for it. So those who have an interest in knowing how their food has been grown, knowing where the raw materials into the feed that's been fed to the animals has come from and what impact that has had on people across the world, most certainly will pay a premium. But there's a significant number of our 66 million people in the UK that just want to know how much it costs. And therefore I think the divide will get greater, but I do believe that the percentage of people, certainly those who can afford maybe, will most certainly look at label before they buy.
Okay. We've had a number of questions from different people, essentially around the same thing about, the potential skill shortages, particularly with, the reliance, certain times seasonally, I guess, on international workers. So the question, the first part of the question is really about, how are we going to ensure that we're able to produce and process products to meet ongoing demands, in Wales and in the UK, there's also a question from Anvil Morgan. There's another. I'll come to that one in a minute. Is given the pressures and demands on farming community, do you think, how are we going to be able to encourage the younger generation to pursue a career in the industry? So there's two connected there.
Okay, so if I take the second one first, I missed part of the first one. I'll just answer the second one first, if I may, then, Scott. Yeah, I mean, the pressures on farming really for the younger generation is the commitment in two ways. Commitment financially. Farming's a long-term haul. If anybody's in farming for the short term, it just won't work. Returns are fairly low in comparison to capital employed. So it's very much a long-term haul. It does help if you've been able to inherit a farm and be part of a previous business, but certainly those coming in for the first time is very, very difficult. And of course, the second bit is a commitment of time and unsociable hours. So I think the younger generation do have a different outlook, very, very keen to engage in automation. Good example, if you're a dairy farmer, certainly in my time, in my younger days, I wasn't actually dairy farming, but I would have been dealing and mixing with many, many dairy farmers. Would have been, up in the morning, and still are today, 4 o'clock in the morning to milk. Still a commitment at 7, 8 o'clock at night, every day of the year. But automation is coming in. We're currently milking about 10% of the UK dairy herd through robots, and that's anticipated to grow to 25% over the next 10 years or so. So there's something there. But I believe the younger generation, I've seen an influx of more younger people coming into businesses in the last maybe 2-3 years. And the other negative of historical farming business is that people are very reluctant to give up the checkbook and have continued to farm until well into the 70s and 80s. And I had a situation not so long back, actually, with somebody pretty well known to me. His father had passed away. And at the age of 61, he was asking me whether he felt it was sensible to miss himself out as the head of the business and bring in his 32-year-old son. So there are many challenges over time of why people would commit themselves to farming when A, labour, B, financial, and C, who runs the business. But we are definitely seeing a turn in that, and automation and technology are playing a part.
Okay, thanks, Gareth.
Sorry, Scott, what was the first question? Sorry.
The first question was, you've partly answered it, I think, was how do we make sure that we continue to provide supply of product, particularly seasonal products, where international workers, arguably, owing to Brexit, etc., aren't going to be in supply as much.
Yeah, difficult to think, really. We've certainly seen it this year in the fruit and the veg trade, where in some instances, fruit has remained unpicked. Daffodils, and there was an article on BBC back in the spring, daffodils in Cornwall, fields unpicked. So I think labour is a huge, huge challenge. 2 reasons. Eastern Europeans aren't coming here for the reasons that we know in Brexit, made their money and returned. And secondly, who wants to do the work from the UK, irrespective of whether it's 10, 12 pound an hour. So there is a correlation here, isn't it, as to what your business can afford to pay and who's prepared to do it. So I don't see succession on the farm as being such a problem, but I most certainly see available labour to be a huge issue.
Okay, thank you for that. So returning to our Morgan's question, which are the more difficult to deal with, cooperative members or PLC shareholders?
They all have the different challenges. So I suppose if I call a cooperative members farmers, It is a very good question, actually, and I'll start that with a turnover of. Oh, I'm lost. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I've lost the picture here somehow. I'm not going to cut out. Oh, I'm back. Sorry, I'm back. So I'll answer that in two ways. So let's take the shareholders to start with. The institutional shareholders obviously want a return. They're looking for growth. We have a good dividend policy, long-term, 14 years unbroken, increased dividend policy. If anybody's looking for a dividend, we're a good bet. And IHT funds as well, and we all understand what that means. So those people are looking for growth. They're not interested in what you've done yesterday. More important in our strategy. Our strategy going forward, how can we grow the business? So they are challenging, especially in difficult times. And the institutions don't necessarily understand how the weather has an impact on our business. And the challenge I've got there, Arul, really, is that we'll build relationships with the broker, the investment manager, and he'll understand what we're all about. That person will change. I'll give you a good example. I went to Manchester a year or so ago, and the guy sold out after the meeting. And he said, decent presentation, decent fellas. I think they were pretty well genuine. But I just can't understand how a business is the weather plays an impact, and doesn't know how Brexit's going to impact them. It's this uncertainty. So he sold out. So that's a challenge we have from institutions. We don't get that from farmers. Farmers don't challenge us one bit as shareholders. They're more interested in what we can offer from service and products. And I would say to you, actually, that our farmer members never sell their shares only upon death and marriage. Marriage to raise a bit of funds to pay for the wedding, maybe, and death because, and we've often had people ringing us and saying, look, we never realised that our father could have had, £50,000 worth of Wynnstay shares. So farmer members, I would say, generally speaking, would be the straightforward ones to deal with as far as investors are concerned. But we do have good support from institutions and private clients as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Very different question here from Melanie Hamer. How has the documentary series Our Yorkshire Farm been received in the agricultural community? And would you like to see a similar series about a Welsh farming family?
Yes, I would. I think I'm not a big telly person, but I do watch it. I think it's great because what it brings across to people, I think there, Melanie, was it? Melanie, is that, farmers are important to the sustainable food chain. And that guy there in the uplands, he's got a large family and they seem happy, don't they? And what it brings across is that farming is a safe business, other than farm safety, of course. But it's a good business to be brought up in. It's sustainable. It's not all intensive. And I would say, yeah, I would like to see that. There was a Lambing Live programme actually based in Abergavenny, and that done particularly well. And I think more that we can do, the better, because I think the gap between those who are brought up in the urban environments and don't get the exposure to what agriculture is about is getting wider. And we've all heard, haven't we, about maybe some children in the inner city schools didn't realise that milk come from a cow, but it came from the shop, type of thing. Where did milk come from? At Tesco. So I think more that we can do that, the better. And it's up to us as a farming people to be able to promote our businesses and what we do in a sustainable manner on every platform we possibly can. So the answer is great. And yes, if we could do one from Wales, all the better.
Okay. Paul's come back with another one. There's been a requirement for many years for landowners and farmers to diversify. Do you see this trend continuing? And what are the best examples of diversification, do you think?
Yes, I do. So there's two forms of diversification. Diversification in agricultural enterprises to what they do. So a huge success story in Wales has been free-range eggs. So the beef and sheep farm, I'll give you really good examples here. In mid-Wales, we supply a lot of free-range eggs. We feed 1 in 12 hens actually in the UK, but predominantly in mid-Wales. The beef and sheep farm are struggling probably to make enough money to bring the young lad or the young daughter home onto the farm have gone into eggs, so diversified into eggs, and that's made that business sustainable. Beef and sheep doesn't give you regular income. There's no guarantees. Eggs, you've got contracts, you've got weekly payments. You effectively know what you're going to earn over that 12-month period. So diversification on farm, great. In Wales, in addition to that, tourism, the number of farms with a cottage or maybe a holiday lodge or glamping has increased significantly. COVID has obviously helped that along, and there's been grants to do that. And the other big industry for farmers today is alternative energy, green energy. You'll see as you go around the countryside, turbines, maybe small scale, have solar panels, and also hydro systems. So have farmers diversified? Yes, they have. Will they continue? Yes, they will. And the UK Agricultural Bill will most certainly encourage people to continue doing so, particularly green energy.
Okay, and you mentioned COVID there, so probably the final one to finish off is there's been obviously a number of forced changes to working practices because of COVID. But which are the ones that you see actually, well, assuming we ever come out of COVID, but let's assume we will. Which are the ones that you think will stay in place beyond COVID?
Within our business?
Within the sector, yeah.
Yeah, well, certainly within our business, this is what we're doing now. Communication by teams. If you'd said to me, look, I'm not particularly strong on IT, but if you'd said to me as CEO 18 months ago that I'd be addressing Cardiff Business Club over the computer, I'd have probably said, really? So what has it done for us is as follows. Certainly reduced the miles travelled. That has a positive impact on carbon footprint, of course, but also on time and costs. Our travelling costs within our business is significantly less, next to zero, probably in the last 15 months. But as we go forward, and I'll give you an example, I sit on many subsidiary boards of the business where we would normally travel to that point of contact. Lancaster, for example, every month, 2 hours up, 2 hours back, if you're lucky. I'll only do that physically going forward, probably every quarter. And we'll have a monthly on Teams. One-to-one on Teams is excellent. So I think the biggest thing that we've learned from COVID is how are we going to communicate going forward, and also remote working as well. Not everybody has to come into the office every day, and everybody won't be expected in the office every day. I, as CEO, work 1 day a week from home. I get a lot done. Obviously, communicating with people you can do from anywhere, but if I got reports to write, you can just get on and do it. I get interrupted in work. So I think to answer your question, Scott, how we communicate and how we carry out meetings, reduction of travel, and also a continuation to a degree of working remotely.
Well, thanks, Gareth, and thank you very much for all the questions. We had a really good question and answer session there, so and a wide range of topics. And certainly, I think for me, I've learned a tremendous amount about the sector, as I'm sure many people on the call and those who will tune into YouTube after the event will have done so. And yeah, for what it's worth, I agree with you. I think because I think a lot of businesses are currently grappling with what the future looks like. What are we going to retain and not from these COVID days? But I'm absolutely certain you're right that many businesses will adopt this sort of hybrid model that's been called, which of course will have big implications for, well, particularly travel, which I know a little bit about, but also how we use our workspaces, how city centres are going to be used. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. But I say, getting a perspective on agriculture has been fascinating. So on behalf of everyone at the club, thank you very much for joining us.
Look, thank you all for your time, and thanks for listening. I've certainly enjoyed it as well. Thank you ever so much, and have a good evening.
No, well, I'm just going to kind of wrap up now, particularly because it's the last of these in this particular season. So as I say, I do hope that you've all enjoyed this again virtual meeting, and obviously the comments, which I think by the reaction that you have of Gareth in particular. As I said earlier, tonight actually concludes the 2020-21 season. We will take a break over the summer, although sadly I don't think we'll all be going off for the summer, so we might be able to carry on, but we are taking a break nevertheless. And I guess, wrapping up, Zoom has I guess, come to our rescue as the most effective and safe way of being able to continue to engage with our members and guests. I'll just put a shout out to thank all of our speakers for their contributions over the season. As I said, we have enjoyed hearing from a range of different sectors, which have included automotive, travel, education, insurance, the military, technological, agriculture, obviously tonight, and even from the Secretary of State just before Christmas. Probably being a bit optimistic, but we do hope that we might be able to start some normal gatherings in time for the new season in September. But we'll clearly have to monitor everything very closely over the summer, and we'll keep you informed in the usual way. The speaker program already looks very exciting for the new season, and we are planning a season launch event in early September, subject, of course, to the easing of restrictions if we were able to consider having that in person. So as always, please keep an eye on the website where we will post details in the coming weeks and months. We'll also be announcing details of our membership corporate partnership packages, as well as details of season and event sponsorship packages for next season. Again, details of those will be posted onto the website in due course. So just to conclude, many thanks to our many partners and of course our members for their continued support, and in particular a massive thank you again to our season sponsors, Odgers and Cardiff Metropolitan University, and thanks again to Gareth from Wynnstay for bringing the season to a close with a really interesting discussion. So it just leaves me to say that I wish and hope that you and your families continue to be safe and well over the summer, and we'll very much look forward to seeing you again for a new season in September. So thanks very much and good evening. Goodbye.